Welcome to Conversations with John Harper, More Than Meets the Eye, which is part of a series of conversations we'll be having until John gets fed up, basically. My name is Rez Huseyin. I'm a student of the Diamond Approach, a spiritual path that I discovered through my work with the Enneagram. This is John Harper, Diamond Approach teacher, Enneagram guide, and author of now 3 books, the latest of which was published this week. So, John, would you please share the name of the book, what it's about, and how and who it's for?
The title of the book is Nurturing Essence, a compass for essential parenting. And the market, the audience, is parents who are interested in what's going on in that little person's inner world as they are developing. So the whole development of the character and the personality and the ego structure is a well-known developmental process that goes through many stages. But the book is the first that I know of that looks at that developmental process and includes the role of essence and the loss of essence as it occurs during that process. So the book addresses what can parents do to help foster and maintain the child's connection to their essence as they go through this developmental process, which we all have to go through. It's part of human development. You can't not go through it. You need that structure to function in this dimension of being. But there are things we can do to mediate the degree that essence sinks back into the unconscious. We can support the capacity of the child to have more access to their essential nature.
Mm. That sounds so great. I haven't read it yet, so we're going to have a longer discussion about it. But just a question that's coming now is, or a statement really, a parent wouldn't need to have access to the essential quality themselves in order to be able to support.
I
Yeah.
think I know what you're trying to get to, but the answer is optimally yes.
Mhm.
But since most people in the world are not connected to their essential nature, there's a degree or a certain amount that can be done if you're at least aware of what essence is, what your essential nature is.
I think we'll be returning to this again after I've had the chance to read it. But actually, what I want to talk with you about today will probably draw on some of the insights you share in the book. So, what I would love to do today, if you're up for it, John, is to elicit some of your guidance on the Enneagram of specific reactions. So it doesn't matter if I don't know whether you've looked at these recently. I don't think it matters if you have, because I think when you see them, you'll probably start channeling as you do. But are you up for talking about those?
Yeah, as long as you name them, name
I
the.
will, I will. I think it would be helpful if we did a share screen. I've got them
Oh,
through the really grand glossary, or you can do it if it's easier, but they are available there on the glossary.
I think you can share that you have permission because you're a kind of a co.
Okay, great. So I'll do it in a mo, but before, I think we'd better talk about basic trust first because that's going to be necessary to have like a working understanding of what that is. So can you describe what that is from the perspective of the Diamond Approach, and then what other religions or spiritual traditions, if you know what they call it, or if you don't know, it doesn't matter.
It's not intellectual. One
And
will
can you,
not, no one will not understand trust by defining it, looking it up in the dictionary, remembering how they've been betrayed, experiences in their lives around trust, looking at situations that uh, I trust this person or I don't trust this person or this situation. Okay. You have to get under all of that into the phenomenological experiential ground of what's actually happening in you around what you call trust. We're using a word to talk about some kind of phenomenological experience. So, unless we get into that, into the immediacy of that phenomenological experience, we'll never understand what the hell trust is because trust is just a word. The experience of basic trust is an experience that everything's okay. Everything will work out in some way. It doesn't matter how it goes, you know. There's a sense of confidence in the unfoldment of reality. Okay, and this brings in quite clear into focus the difference between the ego self and the individual consciousness or the soul. You know, trust is a big issue for the ego self because it's taking itself to be a separate identity. And part of that identity is it's identified with a body that can be hurt, violated. Okay? All kinds of things are possible if we're taking ourselves to be this separate entity that has this body. Okay? The soul can't be damaged, can't be harmed. For that to happen, for the soul to have an experience of being betrayed or abused or violated or any of that, okay, it has to be identified with being a separate entity. The whole notion and dilemma of trust is only an issue for our ego self.
right,
I'll give you an example. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so I have a lot of self-reliance. Like I can do it. I have a lot of at least projected confidence in my capacities and abilities. And by God, I'll stand by them, even if I'm internally going, I don't know about this. Don't let them see that. Of course, we know what the hell's going on, right? So I've always had a deep or solid sense of trust in myself, in my capacities. Like always felt like you could pick me up, give me a bag of tools or, just a Bowie knife and drop me on an island like Robinson Crusoe, and I would figure it out. I'd be okay, you know. But one day I'm sitting right in this chair looking out this above these screens out this window that I normally am looking out. And I realized, I mean, it just opened up into me like, oh, it's not that I trust myself. I actually trust the universe. That was like the hair went up on the back of my neck, to see through that. And part of why it was so shocking is when I was born, uh, there was something kind of wrong with my body. Like, I don't know if I was a blue baby or whatever, but when I was born, they took me and everybody had me over at this table and they were working on me to stabilize whatever they wanted to stabilize in me. And then someone turned around and my mother was turning blue because she had a ether mask on and she had vomited and choking on the vomit and she was about to die. So the adrenaline in the room went sky high and everybody left me except one nurse bundled me up and took me off to a nursery, right? And they all went to mom. So that had a huge impact on my soul, that this world is a hostile place. It's not a place that one can depend on. Not a lot of basic trust in this. So I better get my act together. Now, we're putting words to an experience where no words are involved. It's a felt phenomenological thing that's happening within the organism, right?
Mm.
A survival drive, like, I need to be more alert. I need to be capable to do things, stuff like that. And so I get into the spiritual work and the Enneagram work. I've been on a spiritual path for 15 years before I get into the Diamond Approach or become aware of the Enneagram. But I have this image in me that the world is an anvil and life is a hammer. And I'm on the anvil and life is, pounding me. And there's this sense in me like, I will survive. Throw whatever you want at me. Okay? And that was the kind of the foundation of my trust in myself. Like, I can take it, I can handle it, throw whatever you will at me, right? But my life has been one of constant support from reality and the universe, which is totally flying in the face of this sense of independence of this entity identity. And the more that I did this spiritual work, the more I came in touch with, that the universe is actually supporting me, taking care of me,
Mm.
which eventually led to sitting here and going, oh my God, I have a certain confidence and trust in myself, but that's totally predicated upon this deeper trust in reality. And it's a felt sense.
It's a felt sense. Yeah, I think that was helpful. And
And you can look at the Enneagram, okay? Each of them makes a huge statement. They're all a strategy around trust.
well, yeah, I mean that's what I want to bring us to. And why we're even talking about basic trust is because the specific reactions are what Hamid A.H. Almas identified as the reactions or the ways of coping with the loss of basic trust. So specific reactions. So these reactions are what occur when the soul becomes out of touch with basic trust. Everyone has some basic trust, whether they recognize it or not, otherwise they wouldn't be functional at all. So the reactions are what we can see, or the extreme versions of these reactions are what we can see when we've become when the connection with basic trust is very obscured. But they're also general tendencies because of what you were saying earlier. Basic trust is so precarious as an ego self that these reactions that he's identified, we can find ourselves doing quite general, mild versions of them, I think. So I'm going to share the screen now, John, and then get you to sort of, if you, I'd like for you to just look at them and then just riff on them.
That will be what has to happen.
That will be cool. I expect I don't understand all of them. I've only just began to notice how the one for my type shows up. Um,
I'm probably in the same boat as you. Let's see what happens.
yeah. Let's start with yours, John, because I would imagine, can you see that all right?
No, oh, there it is. Okay, I've got it.
I would imagine that the blaming is a self-directed blaming for this.
That's an interesting thing, blaming. One thing that probably isn't talked about a lot in Enneagram circles is the eight's relationship with blame and guilt.
Hmm. I'd love to hear you speak more about that, actually.
Well, we the eight takes itself to be this strong, independent individual. So where else is the blame going to fall for anything except on oneself? You know, the eight's whole gig is to become bigger than the problem and deal with the problem, handle the problem, resolve the problem, conquer, conquer the mountain, all of that. So anything that goes wrong, you know, the only place to put the blame is on the all powerful one, which one is taking themselves to be. And blame is intimately connected with guilt. So there is this profound dance happening within the eight around blame and guilt, but it's a subtle thing, especially the guilt. It can be subtle, and the guilt is kind of connected to two. Okay? There's a vulnerability involved. There's a neediness involved. All of this gets dredged up in this blame and guilt dance. Uh, and depending on where one is in their personal work with themselves, it can feel pretty icky. I had a mother that loved to guilt trip us into things. And I did not enjoy that aspect of my mother at all. Rebelled against it, couldn't wait to get out of her sphere of influence. But the blame is also, of course, obviously, uh, a huge interaction that's happening between the eight and their superego. And if one understands the relationship of the superego with strength and power, okay, which are essential qualities, the red and the black, okay, which are also considered to be two of the primary defenders of essence. Okay. The superego has co-opted your essential strength and your essential power and is using it against you to keep you in the box, to keep you conforming to the family and societal parameters that were laid down in childhood. Who's responsible for my loss of essence? Oh, I'm going to be blaming myself. I didn't make the right choice. I didn't do the right thing. It's all my fucking fault. But that is something that it's such an interesting thing. I can get involved and dance with my superego, and we all do this in our own way. And I can tolerate a great deal of the suffering and pain and angst and all of that that is involved in that process. But to really drop down to the core of it is intolerable uh, because of the increase in the pain and suffering. But it becomes intolerable because it will lead you to the point of deconstructing the ego, which is every ego and personality's greatest fear and greatest terror is the deconstruction of that self. So the blame guilt trip that we go on is a way of actually defending against the deconstruction of the self.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
You know, as Alma says, none of us we'd all be totally psychotic and loony bins if we didn't have some degree of basic trust.
Mm.
Some connection with the fundamental ground of reality is needed to function in this world. Doesn't matter how far off kilter we are in the realm of being a separate identity. But the loss of basic trust is not necessarily, few things are based upon one experience in life. And it
Mm.
can be very subtle. Mhm. And again, to understand it, the process that the early child is going through is all pre-verbal. Mhm. There's you can't resolve issues at that stage of development without moving into the pre-verbal realm. Okay? As an adult, when we go into that type of psychological or emotional regressing, our mind is still going to be functional. Our self-reflective mind and its abstract understanding and its capacity for its automatic reifying and conceptualizing of our experience and associating that with past events or knowledge or all that's going to happen. Okay. But that wasn't there for the child. And one of the biggest hurdles for doing spiritual work is that cascade of thinking or process that starts happening in the mind has such magnetism, has such gravity that it pulls all of our awareness and attention and knowingness into its realm. Okay? But to do this deep work at this level is dependent upon developing the capacity to stay with the immediate phenomenology of our experience, even though our mind is doing its thing. Yeah. You know, we can talk about it later, is what I tell my mind. Okay.
Mm.
This, you know, this felt sense, this experiential thing that's revealing itself, that is what needs to be engaged to work back to a level of connectedness with basic trust. It deals with, uh, well, the process can go like this. You know, I'm having an experience of something, okay, and I can look at it with my external mind, my capacities I have now, and I can remember, oh, yeah, that's been here quite a while. You know, I remember when I was 8 or 6 or whatever, and I can take it back so far like that. Okay. But as I do that process of inquiry, I'm going to be getting in touch with the sensations that arise around that stream of experience that's connected. Okay? This is where the whole concept of affective nuclei come into play, which basically says that one of the ways our brain stores information and 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 does that in an efficient way to conserve energy is it takes everything that has the same emotional impact and puts it into the same filing cabinet drawer. All this anger is stored in the anger drawer. And that's why when somebody triggers the anger, the whole drawer gets pulled out and dumped on the floor. Okay. All that history, all that charge is just in one's immediate experience. So as we track back and we start triggering that affective nuclei in our cells, okay, we become closer. We're getting closer and closer to ground zero around the whole thing. Okay. But that needs to then go through a process of discriminating out the experience of the energy in the nervous system around it and the contractions in the nervous system that are arising in response to whatever situations that happened that disconnected us from trust. Okay? All of that's patterned within our muscles and our nervous system. So, you go back through the cognitive level and self-reflective understanding, you get into the emotional level of it all, and then you really have to move into the nervous system and the cellular level. And that can only be done experientially. The soul doesn't have a mind. It's not there thinking. It has taken on the form of this person that has these issues, that has these contractions, that has these beliefs and what. That's a form within the consciousness itself. So to undo that form, okay, to loosen it up, to return the plasticity to the soul itself means a process needs to take place where those contractions and charges can release, can let go. And again, the difference between spiritual work and psychological work is in psychological work, a lot of times, there will be cathartic experiences, energy will discharge. Okay. But quite often, that's where the inquiry ends. Okay. Discharging brings some sense of stability to the ego self. And that's what most psychology is about, bringing more stability, cohesiveness, functioning to that sense of being an independent self. Hell, that's where spiritual work begins.
You were saying in our last conversation, like you actually need that robust self in order to engage spiritual work. So it's not like you're. I'm sure you're not dismissing the value of psychological work, but it is a different level of
I
work.
would be the last person to dismiss psychological work because I was the person that thought psychological work was a bunch of bullshit until I got into the Diamond Approach and it opened my eyes to, holy cow, this is like a treasure trove. It's how one approaches it, and it's this basic understanding. Talk about basic trust. This basic understanding of the difference between the constructed self and the unconstructed self, or presence and beingness itself, uh, and the type of what we in the Diamond Approach call the essential person, the pro beyond price. To understand that, okay, is phenomenal. The two dance together. The Diamond Approach uses psychological inquiry and psychodynamics to penetrate deeply into this constructed self, to bring one to the point of that breaking down. It may not break down totally, but let's say there's a particular issue and pattern around one thing that is tightly held together in the matrix of that self, that gets challenged, that loosens up, that falls apart. There's a way of one experiences themselves in a radically different way, just with that one piece of their structure falling apart. Okay? But you need to have the resiliency for the ego self to put that back together, because to a normal constructed self, okay, it takes acclimation. It takes time to acclimate to the experience of experiencing what it is we actually are, as opposed to what we've been taking ourselves the whole time to be. And if I haven't gone through that acclimation to my nature, okay, and I lose, like lose a gear in the functioning of my constructed self, I'm going to walk around in the world, uh, you know, doing weird things, having weird reactions, being uh, maybe not totally psychotic, but I'm going to have issues. Okay? So the process of the constructed self falling apart, coming back together, falling apart, coming back together, uh, in specific kinds of ways, dealing with certain kinds of issues, it builds a resiliency in the ego self itself, and at the same time, one is discriminating the experience of essence and beingness that underlies it all, and your sense of identity starts shifting. And the more that one's identity uh, becomes, I'm this presence, I'm this isness, I'm this existence that is at the center of all of this that I'm experiencing. Okay? You know, now you're clipping along with a full team of horses.
So, given all that, John, given everything you've just said and about the need to get in touch with these sort of pre-verbal imprints, which is presumably not a short or quick process, do you think this is useful, the Enneagram of specific reactions?
Well, I think the Enneagram in general is very useful.
Yeah, but the reactions specifically.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Enneagram of specific reactions, okay, come from the book, as it shows there, The Facets of Unity, okay, which have to do with pure, unobscured uh, visions or revelations of reality. Like 9 lenses reality can be seen through. And then they're not the only 9, but they are 9 specific lenses that map onto the Enneagram of personality types. Mhm. So the again, the more we talk about the Enneagram, I got to quit coming back to my major bone of contention with the Enneagram, which is you can spend your whole life creating more and more minutia in your understanding of the Enneagram, and it won't free you. Like I can understand the Enneagram as specific reactions, the whatever the other 3 are, at the issue around the particular view of reality with each Enneagram type, like, truth or point 8.
Mm.
Okay? So what gets in the way of experiencing truth? You see with point 1 is holy perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the loss of basic trust means that I lose touch with the perfection of reality. If that's a big deal to me, to my developing psyche and what have you, my personality, Okay. And it's starting to develop this one character, type one character. Okay. What am I going to do to try to get myself back in touch with reality? I'm going to try to correct it, to improve it, to make it perfect again. That's what I'm missing, is the perfection, right? And I'm
Mhm.
being driven by this dynamic of improving reality, which is already perfect. So that's a a game of futility right there. You see, and that brings me back to the futility of trying to work with this within a conceptual framework. I mean, this is true. My specific reaction as a one is to improve things. Okay. But I can't use that knowledge to come up with some kind of strategy of doing and working with my personality type uh, to lead me back to the ground of being. I can use it to help deal with certain aspects of the external reality in the world. Okay, I can develop skillful means out of my insight into this dynamic, but I can't reconnect with reality through any of that strategy and doing that, because connecting with reality is a phenomenological experience. It's an experience of beingness. Right? I can't get there when you could look at this whole thing like a hamster wheel. Okay, I'm stuck in this hamster wheel of the Enneagram of personality types. I can run on that thing forever, you know, chasing improvement and manipulating and control.
You're preaching to the converted here, John. I'm completely with you, but I still think there's value in this. What he's done here is named the doings, so the things that we can observe at the surface level that are underlying. And so the opportunity here is, oh, I'm noticing myself controlling. I'm noticing I'm withdrawing, and then from there the inquiry begins. So it's like, that's, to me, that's what the use of these are. So it's not about it's,
But
to me, it's
there's a fork in the road, and they're both valid.
mm,
They're not only, they each have value and use. Okay, let's talk about withdrawing. Okay? Like, if I notice that when things happen I withdraw, okay, yes, I can work externally within my framework of personality to address that, to confront it, to build more capacity in myself, to where my immediate reaction to withdraw isn't acted upon. And that is a good thing. That will serve me in life. Okay. That, but if I want to work on the deeper elements of that, I need to get in touch with the experience of withdrawing. So it's twofold. It opens up two paths for you, and most of us working on ourselves, you burn the candle at both ends. You work on
mm,
both.
yeah.
I work on becoming a more functional, stable ego self, less reactive. Okay, by using this information in ways that uh, not only make sense, but each of these have so much research and psychological literature to help us work on each one of these. Okay,
Mm.
so I do that, to improve my external life, and at the same time, I want to get underneath all that.
Mm. Hmm. Yes, that seems very true what you're saying. There are two levels to working with it, and probably most people using the Enneagram are using it to sort of balance out their ego. But I agree with you, that's kind of
And that is not a bad thing, because that's part of the process that will lead people eventually to going, there's got to be something a little more to this.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I get all this, but I have all this understanding of my personality type, but there's still something that, I feel like there's still something missing. There's, I'm not satisfied. It's not satisfying something deeper in me. Okay?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
eventually everything will lead us home, whether we find the Enneagram, or, we just sit down and sit still for a decade under a tree.
Yeah. Something else, John, about these is most of them for me seem to be, they track quite sort of in quite obvious ways to the whole constellation of the type. But the one for four, for instance, controlling.
I've heard it said more than once that fours are the most controlling people on the planet.
Really? You lived with a four, right, for years, so maybe you'll be able to shed some light on this.
Well, she had her very clear on her preferences, and would just stick by them, stick to her guns on everything, you know. But I think the issue comes down again. One of these days, we should maybe discuss the Diamond Approach's graphic that has to do with the structure of the ego.
Hmm.
Because what what's trying to be controlled is this incredible amount of contraction needed to hold the type together. And the control is not only internal to hold all that contraction together, but also to control external events to support the controlling of keeping my identity together. Right? Because for the four, right, the whole thing is holy origin, right? Wanting my true self. But to have your true self, who you're taking yourself to be, has to totally fall apart. Okay? That's a very scary thing. And the fours have an incredible sensitivity in them. So they may be more pre-consciously in touch, you know, with the magnitude of that experience that lies ahead. And it's a terrifying experience for the ego identity. So because they have that type of emotional energetic sensitivity, they're pumping a lot of watts into keeping themselves together, even though they long for what's true in themselves, and that's driving them. They can't have that without letting go of the control, without the dissolution of the self. So it's a real conundrum.
Mm,
And the same conundrum for every type.
yeah. I know that's helpful actually. And of course, preferences, having preferences about so many things is a way of controlling, and I do have my preferences. So this is okay, this helps. Thank you. I think we covered some good stuff, John. What's your sense of our conversation?
Well, I think I'd have to watch the video.
Mm, yeah.
Seems like, but this is how it is for me to be in a conversation, is you just bumble and stumble your way through things
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see, see where it leads. And